welcome to Pursue the Pull, the podcast that is geared towards helping people who are looking for a career change or for those who want to pursue their dreams and start their own business. So how do we differ from all of the other inspirational podcasts out there? Well, what we do is we interview a range of people from a range of different industries. So if you want to start your own marketing agency, your own software company, your own restaurant, whatever it might be, we have someone specific from that industry to tell you how to get started, the highs and lows, and most importantly, the truth. Now, we are one group, one community, and we have all of the answers. I am your host, Stacey Bevan, and today I have an amazing guest. Her name is Anna Morgado, and she is the founder of Anna Morgado Ceramics. So first of all, I just want to thank you for joining us, Anna. I'm really excited for this interview.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm also very excited to be here.
Good. Okay, so look, before we deep dive into the questions, I just want to give the audience a little bit of background, a little bit of information about you. So you are a ceramic artist born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. You started working with ceramics in 2016 and have lived in Lisbon and Amsterdam before moving to Hamburg, where you are currently based. Now, your work revolves around material experimentation and refined design. Now, throughout the years, you have collaborated with private clients, chefs, and restaurants, crafting exclusive tableware for wonderful and passionate projects. Now, as you start to venture into crafting pieces for the home, you keep yourself forever fascinated by the captivating relationship between ceramics and food. Not only have you worked on various projects, you also sell a range of beautiful products on your website, which I have seen, and they are gorgeous. You also give workshops, one-to-one sessions, and you offer memberships all in your own studio in Hamburg. Now, teaching is a way that you have found to connect with others through the power of play and giving back to your community, offering new tools for self-expression and fulfillment. So this is incredible, and I just want to get straight into it. So tell me how all of this came about. So what's your background? Did you study? Did you go into work and then decide to kind of go into this on your own? So how did this all come about?
So I actually never studied ceramics.
Oh, wow.
The way it just came to my life was quite unexpected and, to be very honest, a little bit even uneventful. I actually studied graphic design and visual communication. I grew up in Rio and I went to university there. So I feel like as a child, I always wanted to be an artist, and I think like many children do. But I mean, I guess growing up in Rio, and maybe that's the reality for a lot of people, it can be quite tricky if you choose art as your, professional path. It's not that easy living. So I think because of my family, and I come from a very traditional school as well, it never felt like a real option. So I chose graphic design because it felt like a good compromise. You can still be creative and you can still find a stable job. You can, provide for yourself a bit more safety. So that's why I chose that. Yeah. And when I finished university, I started working and immediately, by accident or not, I think it's also because I was always fascinated by it, I worked with branding. So I worked in branding agencies, and I love in graphic design, that's definitely my favorite part. Yeah. And while I was working on my office job, a friend of mine that went to school with me, she said, well, I would love to try a pottery class. I've been thinking about going to one. Would you like to join? And then I said, well, yeah, sure. And to be very honest, it felt very like, yeah, whatever, we can go. Yeah. I was going more to keep her company, let's say. And I immediately fell in love, of course, and we took some classes together. After a while, she decided it was not for her, so she stopped, but I kept going every week. And I did that for 3 months. So it's a lovely studio in Rio, and that's where I learned. But it was a place where I would go, they would help you out, but essentially it's not a proper training, right? So you can use the studio and do your own work. And I was probably a very annoying student I was asking a lot of questions because I was so interested in the process, like from glazes and the chemistry of it to the kilns and how to set that up. So I think I didn't think too much about it back then, but I guess looking back, I can see that something in me kind of really, really wanted to understand the craft. Yeah. And after 3 months, I moved to Lisbon, as you said. Okay. So, that was a moment where I told myself, okay, I have an option here. I could try to see how that's going to go if I focus on ceramics a bit more, but with no expectations. It didn't feel like, I don't know, it didn't feel like I wanted to make a business out of it. It just felt like a good path because I was having fun. So it was just me following the fun of it and try my best to kind of make it work. So when I was working in my office job, I saved some money and then I had a little bit of money saved. So when I moved to Lisbon, my biggest goal was to find a studio so I could, keep learning and start doing my own work. And to be very honest, because this was a while ago, this was in 2016, I feel like ceramics back then was not as big as it is right now. So finding a studio was not easy.
Yeah.
I remember literally walking around the city and trying to find places and asking people. And I couldn't find anywhere that had a wheel. So some places you could go and work on like hand building or you can take classes, but I just wanted a space where I can use a wheel and practice and get better. More like a membership space,
Yeah. So can I just ask, why Lisbon?
Oh, great question. So I am Brazilian. I was born in Brazil, but my family or part of my family is Portuguese. So I have Portuguese nationality. So I'm Portuguese Brazilian. And back then my ex-boyfriend, he was in the process of getting his documents as well, because he was also coming from a Portuguese family. So we decided to move to Lisbon to connect with that part of our history and also to get his documents so he could have the Portuguese nationality. And it was not, it would not have been my first option. So that was something that happened more because he needed the documents and we thought it could be a good place, easy to adapt type of thing. It's the same language. So it felt quite safe. It felt like a good option.
Yeah.
But my dream was actually to move to Amsterdam. So when I was in Brazil, I really wanted to move to Amsterdam because I loved that Dutch graphic design. So I was until then a graphic designer. So I really wanted to experience that and work in the Netherlands. But I mean, because of his visa situation, it would have been complicated. We would have to marry for it. So it was easier for him to get his documents, and we're not together anymore. So probably.
It was the best solution at the time. Yes. So how did you say that you saved some money in Brazil and then you moved to Portugal, but you didn't move with a job. You moved and started this kind of business straight away. So you saved some money and then wasn't that like scary? Didn't you think, okay, how am I going to make money? Is this going to make me enough money? Were there all these kind of things that were playing in your mind? And how did you prepare for all of that before this move?
Definitely. I think I have to say I was very naive. I was quite young. I was 23.
Yeah.
I think. And I had some money saved. Also, when I moved, I was still working as a freelancer for this company. So when I left the company, they kept me as a freelancer, which helped. It's not stable. So it was whenever they needed, they would contact me. And I really loved the team and I loved working with them. So for me, it was a good place to be because I could stay in touch with that team that I really liked.
Yeah.
And it gave me a little bit of financial stability. But of course, the money I was making was real, which is the Brazilian money. I don't know how to say that, the currency in Brazil. And that's it's quite difficult if you're making money in real to actually live in Europe. In euro, it's a big, big difference. So it was definitely not enough. So for a little while, that was, I could use some of my saved up money. And at some point I was working at cafes. When I found a studio after 1 year, I really quickly realized, okay, I need to teach if I actually want to make some money. And I started to give classes, but I only had one wheel, which my mom gifted me. So this was I think my first Christmas there. She sent, of course, I didn't have that money. So she sent money as a Christmas gift, which was very kind. And I'm forever grateful.
Yeah.
And then when I finally found a studio, I could have my wheel there and I could start teaching classes 101. It was still not enough money. So in my mind, when I moved, I thought to myself, well, easy, I'm going to find a studio, I'm going to make pieces, I'm going to sell the pieces, and I can pay my rent. It's really not how it goes. It was very unrealistic of me to think that that was the reality. And maybe part of me, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit grateful that I was that naive, because maybe if I was a bit more realistic, I would not have done it.
Not, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I guess that's part of business. Sometimes you have to be a bit unrealistic, because otherwise it is very scary.
Yes.
And it feels like, I think the odds are not always. Can you say again? The odds are against you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so as a business owner, you kind of have to have this sometimes just very almost childlike vision of things and do it, and then you figure it out as you go in many ways. And I tried my best to organize. And sometimes my mom would have to save me, if I have to be very honest. So at the beginning, sometimes she would send me a little money to be able to pay for rent, because I was definitely not able to cover for my own costs just by doing that. Yeah. So
how did you stay motivated? Because obviously this is like a year. We're talking, you moved to Portugal and then it took you a year to kind of find a studio. What made you not give up? Because you could have just like used the skills that you had in terms of graphic design and just, got a job and got, a stable income coming in. But what made you what motivated you to continue to push to get this going?
Oh, that's a great question, because I don't even know. It's like, I for me, it was just a deep sense of knowing. And I knew that what I really wanted. And I think in that sense, maybe what I did really well was that I stayed connected with that feeling.
Yeah.
And that feeling for me felt a little bit like a guide. And while I was following it, I kind of had the sense, okay, this is really hard right now, or this is really not where I wish it was, but I have a sense this is the right thing. Yeah. So it was just this very strong sense of like, that's what I need to do. And that's what I need to focus on, and try my best to keep going and to stay naive, even in many ways. But it was not always like this. There was for 3 years, I stopped. There was a time where I had to stop because financially it was not possible for me. And that's when I was in Amsterdam. So there were times where I had to take a step back.
Yeah, but you came back into it essentially. So how did it start then? Like really start? Because you said you got the studio, you found a studio, and you were funding that through, was it your freelance work? Like, how was you funding the studio? How did that then start developing?
When I found the studio, essentially that was my first. So any money that I would have, it would go first for that.
Yeah.
Not my rent even. So sometimes my boyfriend would cover a bit more of the rent. Sometimes my mom would send me a little bit of money. Sometimes I would make a little extra money. And then, but every month was really like this, like it was really, money wise was very strict. And it was just like 1 month after the other. And if I had to think too much ahead, then things got very confusing and stressful, of course. So it was more like, okay, I can get through this month and then another one. And at some point, of course, a little bit more money started to come because I got my first client. And then from my first client, there was another client. And then at some point, it starts to roll a little bit by itself. But back then, I feel like, because I think that's also when you have a business as an artist, a big lesson is how to price your work, right? Because you are the one deciding how much that's worth. you have to, and I guess it's especially true when you are, in my case, an artist of functional pieces, because when you talk about maybe a sculpture, it can be very subjective how much you can charge for it or how much people are willing to give. But when you talk about a cup, everybody knows the price of a cup, and everybody knows how much they are willing to give for a cup. So there is a big limitation in terms of what you feel that you can charge for the piece, regardless of how much work it goes into creating it. And that was a huge learning experience for me, because at the beginning I was definitely undercharging. And it was, although I had projects and I was making some money, it was not enough to cover my hours of work. I was maybe being able to then pay for the studio, but I was not paying myself at all. And that was the case for many, many years for me.
Wow. And in that instance, like when you working really hard and you're not seeing that money for years, and that's the case for, a lot of businesses, a lot of people, like you say, go into business and they expect it to come quickly and then to start making revenue really quick. And, but it's not the reality of it. And it's really hard when you're spending money and you're putting all this time and effort in, but you're not really making that money. So how did you handle that? Because, that was the most difficult thing that I found, staying motivated when you're not seeing much come from, all these hours and all this effort that you're putting in.
Yeah, I think the word, and that's a new word for me to describe that. But I think it's a great one. And although I was doing that by accident back then, now I see, and it can be a choice. But for me, the word is devotion. And I was so devoted to the craft and to my art and to that dream that regardless of what was going on and regardless if it's working or not, I was going to make it work. And it was not an active choice. Again, I think now I can tell all of this. And if you had asked me this 10 years ago, I would have been like, well, I just want to do it. It didn't have a huge meaning behind it. But nowadays I see that it was actually huge. It was huge for me. Also, I needed to prove to myself that that was possible. And then I can even go into, deeper layers of this, of as a woman in art, what it means and the type of examples I've had. When you think about artists, usually there's going to be a bunch of men that come to your mind. And I think that my decision that I will call myself an artist, which was a huge blockage for me. I could not call myself an artist for most of my career. I was always a graphic designer. Oh, and I do ceramics. It's always like this.
I've had something like that where you feel it's a bit like imposter syndrome.
Completely, yes.
It's that is so true.
Yeah, and I think I needed to prove to myself that as a woman from my background, an immigrant in arts, and to have a business, because everyone can make art and you can do it as a hobby, of course, but you actually make it thrive as a business. That takes a whole new level of deep work. And I think that devotion was the thing that I needed to, even when it was not working, I kept pushing through. And I'm really glad I did, because otherwise I would have given up and never would have come back to doing ceramics, which I think is the case for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you get this first client?
Also, it's going to sound very uneventful, but I was at the studio one day, at the studio in Lisbon, and I was doing my work and just having fun. And at the beginning, of course, I didn't have any clients. So I just did things for myself, things that I wanted, things that I needed, things to challenge my abilities. And then there was these two people came. It was a man and a woman, and it was me and someone else at the studio. I don't remember. We were, back then, maybe, 5 artists sharing the space. And I think it was just the two of us. And they asked, oh, you're going around, we're going to open a restaurant and we just want to see some pieces of the studio in Lisbon, or the studios in Lisbon. And I remember I showed mine. I even remember I showed the work of some of the people that were not there, me and this other person. And then they left. And I didn't think too much of it. And then some days later, they came back. And they said, oh, yeah, we decided and we would love to do the project with you. Maybe we can talk about ideas. And the man that was there was the chef. And he's an amazing chef. I mean, the whole restaurant is an amazing project. So I felt back then I didn't know what it was going to be, but nowadays I feel very honored that I was part of that, and I was chosen to be part of that at the beginning.
Yeah.
And when we decided on prices and pieces, I was doing ceramics for then maybe 1 year, 1.5 years. And they needed 400 pieces or something like this. And that was my face, exactly that, when they asked for it. And I said yes, because of course, I'm not going to say no to this.
Of course.
Had I ever done 400 pieces? No. I was about to learn how to do it, and I was really excited to figure it out. I was really scared also because back then I remember, although I didn't have experience as a business owner, but I remember understanding the pressure of being part of something like this, because I understood quickly, okay, this is someone's dream. Like, these people are putting a lot of money, time, effort, energy. Like, this is a dream project for someone. And if I don't do this right, I'm not going to forgive myself. So for me, it was so important to actually do it and do it well.
Yeah.
Properly. Yeah. So I said yes, and it was completely my process was completely chaotic because, of course, I didn't know how to do it. So I spent a lot of money because I didn't have even the enough equipment. So I didn't have enough space to put everything, and I didn't have a kiln that was big enough. The kiln was not even mine; it was shared with many people. And the kiln was quite small. So I had to go to different cities and ask people to use their kilns and pay, of course, for it. And sometimes we were driving. I didn't have a car, but someone from the studio did, and they would drive me to a kiln in other cities, literally, to be able to fire it. So it was completely insane, the whole process. But it worked. It was done. There was a lot of things that I would have done better. They were also very kind and understanding, and they were great clients overall. But overall, I didn't make any money with the project yet. It was a great learning experience.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. So then how did you start getting more clients? Did you start then doing some marketing, or was it more word of mouth? Like, how did you start building the client base then?
So back then I was not really on Instagram. So I did have an Instagram page, and it was more like a private page where I barely posted anything. And I had 300 followers, 700 followers, just people that I knew. It was definitely not work related. And I never did any type of advertisement. And because again, back then I knew what I wanted, but it still didn't feel like a business. I knew that I wanted to keep doing, but it didn't feel like a business at all. So the reason why more people started to hear about me is because of this restaurant. And because when they opened, they're quite successful. They're an amazing place. So of course, some people would go there and they would see it. And then they would usually, if you're into ceramics, when you see a piece that you like, the first thing you're going to do is this. And then my stamp was there. So some people got in contact. They either would send me emails or they would stop by the studio. So it started to get quite busy. The problem is, almost immediately I moved from Lisbon to Amsterdam.
Oh, no!
And a lot of these projects were local for Portuguese restaurants. And then if I'm not in Portugal, it makes much less sense for me to work on them because what I need to charge in Portugal versus Amsterdam was very different.
Yeah.
And then to send all the pieces and to have meetings and to send prototypes was very, very complicated. So I don't know. It's life, I guess. But that's how people started to see that I existed. And then in Amsterdam, I started to understand the importance of advertising. So that's when I started to create Instagram posts and then sponsor it, for example, but essentially for classes, because this was, let's say, the quick way for me to have some income in a new city without knowing anyone.
So when you moved to Amsterdam, you moved with this business. You didn't go into work. You moved with this business, and then you started doing the classes to generate the income.
Yeah, when I moved there, I wanted to keep doing ceramics, and immediately I was writing people that I found on Instagram that were ceramics related. And by coincidence, on the month that I moved, there were two studios opening at the same time, shared studios, membership studios. And I had a meeting with one of them, and I fell in love with her immediately. I was like, okay, I know we're going to be best friends. And she's very different from me. And she was much older as well. She's Dutch.
Yeah.
And I just really, really loved her. And I said, I really want to work in your studio. And it was her and two other women. And I started working with them. So at their studio was their first member. And that's when I realized, okay, if I want to actually, I had one project for a client from New York, and he had some pieces. So I needed the studio because I needed to do some pieces for him. And anyways, I was already shipping the pieces. So that's why it made sense to keep the contact.
Yeah.
But it was still not enough, of course, to support myself. So that's why I started with the classes, because they had a bigger studio. They had 8 wheels. And because I was their first member, they allowed me to use the studio to teach. So that was a great opportunity for me.
Incredible. And so then you started promoting these classes and then started building up your client base in Amsterdam.
Yes.
And then, so did you have any kind of challenges on the way that made you feel like, you know what, I'm just going to give up? I'm in Amsterdam now. I'm just, this is it. I'm just going to give up. Is there anything that kind of happened significantly that you can think of that was a huge challenge that, made you feel a bit, I think I should give up?
Actually, I broke up with that boyfriend. And then suddenly, Amsterdam is a very expensive city. It's lovely.
Oh gosh, yes.
It's like home to me, and it's still it has my heart, but it is very expensive. And from the moment that we broke up, of course, then I had to cover rent by myself. Oh. And then I had to make a decision. And when I saw myself in that situation, I also realized how tired I was of feeling financially unstable for so many years and living and working month to month. And that was a moment where I said, I really need a break from this feeling, and I need to feel safe for a little while. So I was teaching. I was teaching most of the time that I was there. I just stopped going to the studio because also I couldn't afford it anymore.
Yeah.
And then I looked for a job in graphic design. Yeah. And then when I found one, I started to work full time, and then I was way too exhausted to go to the studio. So I was a lot of times teaching on the weekend. So I was working for many months. I was working 7 days a week easily. But at least it was a time where I could, whenever I was not working, I could rest, and I knew that I didn't have to worry. It was very needed. It was very needed that time as well.
So how did you make the transition at that point? Because now you've got bigger out expenses. You're on your own, so your costs are even higher. And now you have to make the transition almost again to do this kind of full time. Like, how did the transition happen this time round?
You mean to go from working in ceramics to working in an office again?
Yeah, and then leaving the office, or are you still in the office, or going back to, how did it happen? How did it come about?
Yeah, no. So for 3 years, I was in this office. And then after a while, I stopped also giving the classes because it was, again, way too much. And then COVID happened, which also didn't allow me to do the classes. And I wasn't working at this office. So this was 2020. And one thing that I can for sure tell you is that within the 3 years, it started with me really needing a break from feeling unsafe financially for so many years to me feeling a extreme sense of emptiness. And when when COVID hit, I was really, really close to my limit. So I was burning out and I was having anxiety. My anxiety was through the roof, like the type of anxiety that sometimes you cannot breathe and you think, okay, I need to go to the hospital right now.
Yeah.
And back then I remembered I was then with my current boyfriend, and having him was really helpful because he's a doctor, and many times he could actually calm me down by, I don't know, I think he knows how to do it, so I can actually go back into breathing again. Yeah. And I had those crises for a while. And in that time, I didn't know that it was because I was so disconnected from my passion, because nowadays that's how I see it. I feel like I was just disconnected. Yeah. And it had been maybe already 1.5 years that I was not doing what I wanted to do. So my body was telling me that. But when COVID hit, he was transferred to work in Hamburg. That's why we moved here.
Okay.
Yes. So we moved here and I was still working for this job. I was in the peak of my anxiety. I was depressed. So I also had I was working with a psychologist. So we were doing sessions weekly, and it was a period where I felt very lost and very vulnerable. And I mean, financially, things were okay because I had this stable income, and I was not to the point where I couldn't perform. So I could still work and I could still, I was still present, but I was struggling a lot. And when I got to a point where it was that or medication, I did ayahuasca. So I did plant medicine for the first time. Uh-huh. And that brought a lot of information to the surface. And that was a moment where I started to see things differently, because that was the first time where I saw my situation that I could use where I was, which was a stable job from a distance, because I was working out in another country. So I was working fully on my laptop from home. That could be the thing that I needed to actually, for the first time, invest on my dream with a plan, because I had never done this way. I was always like, well, let's see what happens, all or nothing. Yeah. And of course, it didn't work. So when I did ayahuasca for the first time, and after, of course, a lot of therapy, I realized, okay, I'm not a victim of this job. I can choose to use this for funding my dream, because I need money to invest on a studio. I need to open a studio because I cannot keep working in the space of others. Also in Hamburg, there was no shared studio, no membership spaces. So if I wanted to work with this, I had to create it my own.
Yeah.
And then for 1 year, that's what I did. That's when things really changed for me. Then working was not so difficult anymore, because then I was devoted again,
Yeah.
The devotion again.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people that write in, and, I've experienced it at some point myself, when you're working and you're not doing what you're passionate about, and you kind of feel stuck and you don't know how to escape, because all you want to do is work on that passion full time, but it's not generating the money that you need. But then you've got this job that is funding the money, but then you're like, it's not fulfilling me. It's not really what I want to do. So it is a really difficult position to kind of be in. But I did exactly the same. And a lot of people have done exactly the same, where they just saw it as, okay, look, it's going to be a source of funding for what I actually want to do. I'll perform and do this job, great, but this is going to fund exactly what it is that I want to do. And, so it does, once you change your mindset and start thinking like that, it does really help the situation. But yeah, it's frustrating when you're in that position where you're not doing what it is that you want to do. So your plan, you managed to kind of have a plan to do that full transition in terms of making the money, funding the business. So how did that actual transition look?
So when I decided that's what I'm going to do, it was, of course, first thing I had to do was understand how much money I needed, right? I had no idea. I mean, I knew how much a wheel cost, but kilns, had no clue a rent space, what it means to have a rent, what type of, insurances I have to have, what's the cost of a business. And to be self-employed is a completely different place, health insurance wise. You have to think about so many details. So especially in Germany and in German, back then I didn't speak German. So that was a huge, I have to say, I think I'm so traumatized. I have no memory of this phase. Like literally, I don't, if you had to ask me, what did you have to do to have a business? I'm going to say, I don't know. Have no idea. Have no memory. Completely. So my first step was to actually understand what I needed. So what type of space I wanted. So if I want to teach classes, how many wheels do I need? And if I'm going to have members, how big the kiln needs to be. And if I'm going to keep working with restaurants, which means a lot of plates, and that's a very specific type of product, which means you need a bigger kiln for it to be, for it to make sense. So all of these things I started to plan out and kind of create, get to numbers. And from the moment that I did, the goal was to save money. So back then I was almost nothing saved then. So I started to I made a plan. So slowly I would have to save a little bit of money to then get to a point where I could tell my job, okay, I cannot do this anymore, buy everything, and then start treating the business for what it is, a business. Because in the past I was treating as a hobby, but trying to make a business out of it, which does not work. So the first thing I did was to define how much money I needed. So what was going to be the investment for everything? If I wanted to give classes, how many wheels I wanted. So what that means in terms of space, how much space I need if I want to have classes, or 6 wheels or 8 wheels or whatever. If I'm going to have members, how big the kiln needs to be. If I'm going to work with restaurants, how big the kiln needs to be. So all of these things I started to kind of understand and actually try to make it as clear and tangible as possible so I can start saving that money and create a plan. So if I need 6 months to get that money, that means that in 6 months I can start either reducing my hours at my current job or fully quit. So I remember what I did was every time there was a little bit more money that I could save, I would already buy something. So I feel like maybe back then I didn't want to risk having to use this money for any type of emergency. So I was already buying the wheels. I didn't have where to put it. So I just bought it. And there was an empty room in our apartment and I left it there. And then when I bought the kiln, it's gigantic. So, not gigantic, but it's quite big. And a friend of mine worked somewhere and they had a warehouse. So they told me you can just leave it there. So it was like, I had to be very creative with this organizational process, but the important thing is that slowly I was buying what I needed. And at the end, it was quite, for me back then, it felt like a very, very big investment. The type of money I never invested in anything in my life. So I feel quite lucky that I managed to do it and that I managed to get myself to organize enough to do it. And once I had the studio, so then I found a space when I had everything. And I kept my job. So I found a space. I put everything there. I think back then I still needed 2 more wheels because I wanted 6. And then I put my first class. So this was when I first started buying everything was already around 2020 when I moved. End of 2021, I decided to offer a workshop to see, the market. And again, here in Hamburg, well, maybe I didn't see it too much, but I didn't find too many options of studios that offered classes. There were a handful, no studios that offered membership. So for sure there was a space in the market, but the question is, are people actually interested in this? So and nobody knew me in the city. So there's also that. And I was still not posting on Instagram. So I just made sure that I created one post and advertised for it. It was a tableware course, which is a course it's a system that I created when I was in Amsterdam. And I absolutely love this class. It just, each person does their own tableware set. And it was fully booked. And that's the first time I was like, okay, maybe I can make money with this, because for the first time, all profit was mine, right? Of course I had, but first time it was mine. And then I did another one. And then again, it was fully booked. And then slowly I started to talk to my office and say, okay, I feel like I cannot work with you full time anymore. Then I think I reduced for 4 days a week. And then at some point I was doing like 1 day a week, which was completely crazy. But maybe for like a month or two, I was only doing 1 day a week until I fully quit. And one thing I did, I did this time different was that I waited until I had this money coming and to feel, okay, I can actually pay for the studio and pay myself.
Yeah. So all your wages, everything that you were earning for about a year, you were putting into this business. You were buying all of the things that you needed. So everything you were earning was going on to stuff like that, because, you know, there's a period where you get to where all of your salary and everything you're earning, you're putting into the business. You're not really seeing any results, obviously, because you're just, you know, investing at that stage. And, you know, you get to a point where you're kind of like, okay, look, I'm investing all this money. Everyone else has got savings and they're, you know, putting deposits on houses and so on. And I'm here and all of my money is just going into this business. And it does feel a little bit, you know, am I kind of doing the right thing? So you did that and you put all of kind of your money into it. And then you started this workshop and then you gradually moved over, you gradually done that transition. That's really good. It's a really good way of doing it, because a lot of people say make sure that your, you know, earnings from your business kind of exceed or match what you was earning in the company that you were working for. But it looks like you did it kind of gradually and was able to do that with your job.
Yeah. I think for me, it was quite important to do it this way, because how I did it before definitely did not work. It didn't work for too long. So I needed another strategy. And it was also a very specific position that I was in. Again, it was still like COVID was still a thing. So I was still working from a distance. Then, of course, I was also in another country. So all of these things kind of played a role. I think if I was still in Amsterdam, I don't know, maybe yes, but maybe I would not have done it. One, because things were more expensive, or because, you know, I felt so connected to that office job. I didn't feel like I had an option. So being physically distant from it made me a little bit more distance myself as well emotionally. So it was a very specific position that I was in. And for me, that was exactly what I needed. And I mean, I made it work with what I had, of course, but it felt like a good plan. And I think one thing I would tell anyone, and I do tell people that because I also work with mentorship of other artists nowadays, is that, you know, I'm always, yes, follow your dream. And I think that should always be our goal. And you should understand why you're doing it, because it's very easy to give up if you don't have the why, the devotion part. But then also be responsible. So if you cannot pay yourself, you're not doing your business any good, because you're going to give up. And that's what I did. I was working against myself. I was working against my business, and that's not smart. So having a strategy and making sure that you take the steps, even if it's super slow, but you're still taking the steps, you need to make sure it's sustainable for you. If it's not working for you, if you cannot pay for your rent and for food, it's not working. So that's definitely a big lesson for me. So
and a lot of people that I interview, they always say the same thing as well. It's having that why are you doing this? Because that's what keeps you going. So just on the last couple of questions, so if you've already given a little bit of advice in terms of if someone wants to start a business, what advice would you give them? But can you give a little bit more? Because a lot of people do have a lot of fear, a lot of self-doubt. They are in this period where they're working and they're not really sure how to do the transition. So what advice would you give to people that are in that position and want to start a business but not sure how, or they've got all of these kind of self-doubt and these thoughts?
So this is a moment where I'm going to go into a big part of my business, which maybe not everyone is going to connect with that. But for me, my business is a spiritual practice in many ways.
Yeah.
And I do take my spirituality and what I believe in, how energy and how things flow in life, to my business, that's for sure. So one thing at least I learned, and it's something I carry with me, is that the world is going to see you and your business the way you see yourself. So if you don't believe in yourself, nothing's going to really move forward for you. If you're afraid of being seen, people are not going to see you. They're not going to see your work. I feel like doing this internal work, and it's not like I can tell people what they need to do the internal work, because that's going to look different for everyone. So for me, as a spiritual person, this came with ayahuasca and meditation and all of these, a bit more spiritual tools. And for some people, it's going to be different types of therapy, or reading certain books, or I don't know, like there's so many tools out there that can help you to find the answers, but finding the answers to actually understand what's holding you back. Because most of the times it's us. Like we can have all the strategy, but it's always about us. If you still don't feel safe making more money, because a lot of us carry that as well. It feels unsafe to make more money. And
I have that.
Yes, definitely. And as a woman, to feel unsafe to be seen, or you don't want to show how maybe gifted you are in something, or how smart you are. You've been conditioned to be quiet about your accomplishments. So all of these things will have an impact in our business. And if we don't learn that, if we don't do the work in ourselves, our business don't stand a chance. I feel like we're going to struggle for years to come. So we cannot separate these two things, business and who we are, and especially for artists and for creatives, where your work is the core of your business, you cannot really separate these two things. So I don't know, for me, the key or the turning point was doing this type of work, understanding also that if I could not fail, would I keep going? If I knew that I was going to succeed no matter what, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, then you have to keep going, because anything besides from this is just coming from fear, a fear of not succeeding, of maybe looking silly. I think for me, for a long time, I was afraid that I was trying so hard, and I felt silly trying for so long and not being able to make it work, So
how did you build that self-belief? Because that was a really important thing that you mentioned, that if you don't believe in yourself, then no one else is. And, if you're scared of kind of being seen, then no one's going to see. So how did you build that self-belief?
So for me, it came from realizing the impact of how I see myself and how the world see my work, and how that's connected.
Yeah.
And I personally, I have a mentor. It's the technique that she uses is theta healing, which is a meditation technique. I think it's worth maybe looking it up. And she's someone that introduced me to it. And I looked for her after ayahuasca, because I felt like there was a lot of things I still needed to process, a lot of trauma, a lot of, things I didn't know what to do with. And I started working with her, and through her, I got in contact with the technique, and I was also trained in this technique. So I became a practitioner of this technique, which allows me to work on myself. So it's essentially a meditation technique, and you work on your subconscious mind. So you get into a deep state of meditation, and you can understand blockages and beliefs and things that you carry. And the thing is that most of these things is not even ours. Like we carry these things from society, from what we see on TV, from what our teacher from the 3rd grade told us once, and it's still in us. Our parents, previous generations, sometimes pain that is not even ours, but we still carry them, but it's just something that it's in our family line. And I think when you realize that these things have an impact on you, and you start working with techniques that allow you to unblock those, or to remove those from your path, you kind of see that you can actually change. I had a huge problem with being seen. So being seen was a big blockage for me. And that's why I never posted online. And even when I started posting a bit more on Instagram, it was never with me. So if you scroll, I mean, now I have a lot of posts, but if you have patience and you scroll enough, all the first posts is never with me in it. And I realized that during a Theta Healing technique, Theta Healing session, I realized how the reason why I was not posting, and I would give all the reasons to myself, like, oh yeah, I don't know, I like to be private, I like to focus on the work, it's not about me. Like I would convince myself. And then in Theta Healing, I understood, okay, actually, I'm so afraid of being seen because being seen means people can judge me. Fear of judgment, to judge me for my art is something I cannot bear. So I was hiding myself with trying to be safe because that's what my subconscious mind was trying to do. It's always trying to protect us from something. The problem is that not always it serves us. And that's when through Theta Healing, you can work on this and let go of this maybe belief of like, well, if people see me, then they can judge me. Let's say that that's the belief. And it can change for something safer. For example, it's okay for me to be seen, or it's safe for me to be seen. And once you change that, and I cannot explain how it works, but if you do it once, you're going to see it changes immediately, where you just start operating from a different place. And during Theta Healing, I understood, because the question is always, do I still need this? Do I need still to be afraid? Because sometimes we do. Sometimes this fear or sometimes the blockage keep us safe for some reason. And then I understood then that I didn't need it. And it was part of my, let's say, mission or goal to show other women in business that it's safe for them to be seen, that it's okay for them to own who they are and to take up space, because it's a lot about not taking up space or not sharing your voice or, like staying quiet and staying invisible. And, for me, it came from childhood. So I used this technique to shift that. And then I understood, okay, I don't have a choice here. So if I don't change this, nobody's going to change for me. But if I want to see any change from now on for myself and also for maybe next generations of artists, of women that do ceramics, then I need to make sure that I can change this belief and just show up. And at the beginning, it's hard. Yeah. But once you understand why you're doing it, you just force yourself, because it goes back to the devotion. Then I was devoted in becoming comfortable with being seen, because that became my mission to actually prove to myself it's safe. I needed to do that. So I hope that's clear, because honestly,
you explained it really well. I was just kind of listening and I was, okay, this sounds it's really good, because a lot of us have those feelings and it's really hard to, try and overcome and try and, get more self-belief. And like you say, fear of being seen. I had that as well. It took me kind of a year to do my first podcast video because I was like, don't want to be seen in front of the camera. So, it's really difficult. It is something that you do have to kind of work on. There is a lot of preparation that goes into entrepreneurship and owning your own business that I think is hugely beneficial. So, in terms of that, which is amazing advice, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to do exactly what it is that you do? Do that? Would you advise they go and study and do a course? Like, what would you advise?
Actually, before we go into this, can I just say one more thing?
Of course you can. Of course, the more, give me more.
Just because this topic about the fear of being seen or working on blockages, I feel like, first of all, it's very difficult to explain, especially in a short time, because it's such a complex topic.
Yeah.
But one thing, so that's how I have worked through this. And for me, it is spiritual. It is meditation. It is going deep within myself. But one thing I teach, and maybe that's the reason why I want to share one thing I teach, because not everyone relates with this. Not everyone is going to feel a connection with this. Yeah. So one thing I teach the people that I work with is whenever you feel, okay, I'm a woman, and so it's about stating facts. I'm a woman. I am from Brazil. I come from this type of family. So you kind of try to understand logically, rationally, what could be that is keeping you stuck. And for example, I will simplify this as a woman from an immigrant woman from a middle-class family that wants to work on art. I've never seen someone like me doing the type of work that I wanted to do, or having the attention, or making the money that I wanted to have. So when you don't have the example, it becomes really hard to imagine that you can be the one, right? So when it comes to doing the work, is about questioning the stories we've been told. So it's very easy to do this from a rational perspective, which is just, well, as a woman, why do I feel unsafe to be seen? Who's been telling the story that women should be quiet, should be invisible, should not brag too much? Like, who's been telling that story? Who is telling me that artists who charge money for their art are selling their soul? Who says that art that is sold for money is less valuable as art? Because that's another narrative, the whole starving artist archetype. So who are the people or the systems in place that have been telling us? Who has been telling us? And once you understand, so for example, when it comes to being a woman, for me, that's a huge part of my work. When I work with as a mentor, I work a lot with women, some men as well, but mostly with women. And the question is, as a woman, we carry so many specific blockages. So reading or finding literature that can help you question the system and can help you question why we see ourselves this way as a woman, as a business person, as let's say, public figure, as someone that is capable of making money. So what type of system is keeping us like this? And once you question it, it kind of, at least for me, gives me this fire inside of me to prove it wrong and to change something. Yeah. So this is more like the rational way of approaching these changes and approaching the beliefs and blockages that doesn't require you to be too spiritual or into meditation. And because that's just one path, that's just one option to do the work. So that's what I wanted to.
Incredible. So yeah, that's amazing. So to do what you do, what advice would you give if someone wanted to do exactly what it is that you're doing right now?
I think my biggest advice would be to protect your work and to keep it in the center. So to avoid immediately trying to make money from selling your art. Because, of course, some people can do that. A lot of people can do that. It puts a lot of pressure in it. And there is nothing wrong with making money from your art. But if at the beginning it's difficult, you're not being able to sustain yourself, you're going to feel pressure to create, which makes it less fun. You're going to feel like you have to create to be able to eat, which makes it less authentic. And then at the end of the day, you're going to regret and you're going to resent your art. And that's a no-go. So your art should be protected in the center together with you. These are the two most important things. You have to create a system that works for you. So it's a system that is not going to be in the traditional business advice, because if you want to do what I do, which is ceramics as a creative, you have to find a system that serves you, and that's going to be different for everyone. Yeah. So this is actually something, because that's a new something that I offer, which is my online course. And it's exactly about this. So the online course that I created was exactly to honor this path, or this difficult path that I had, in a way to make sense out of it so it can serve my community. So I had to go through such a hard time to make this work. And looking back, I see that I made a lot of mistakes that could have been avoided if I just knew it, or if someone had asked me the right question. So what I did was I created a system to people create their own systems, if that makes sense. Yeah. So what I would tell people is that, besides from protecting themselves and their art, keeping it in the center, is to create a system that serves you. So for example, if you are someone that loves production, maybe that's something you can focus on. But if you don't love production, I am a ceramicist that do not love sitting on the wheel 24/7. It's not what brings me joy. I prefer doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I create products, or I create pieces to sell within my own rhythm. And I understood that my business has to allow that. So don't create a rule for your business just because you think that's what the business requires. So you are the one setting the rules. So if you're, for a long time, I was teaching. And for me, this was a huge part of my identity as an artist. So teaching pottery, and I love it. It's a big part of my passion. A while ago, I understood that I was not having as much fun because I was doing one, way too much. And two, I wanted to focus my creative energy in other things. So I decided that I was going to train some of my girls. So the girls that worked with me, and now they are teaching. So it's a win-win situation where they're getting experience, they're being paid for it. I can have the studio running with classes without me having to be there. So I teach only when I want. But that was the system that I had to create for myself. And if I had stayed in my mindset of like, oh no, but that's my identity, because I struggled with that. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm a ceramic artist, so I have to do ceramics. I would create a problem for myself. So allowing yourself to see what brings you joy and adapt to that. If in 6 months I want to teach more, then I go back to teaching more. So understand that in your business, you are the boss. Of course, some strategy is needed, and be smart about the choices you're making and be very conscious of the choices you're making. But also know that if something is not working, you can take a step back. Because the most important thing is that it works for you. If you make a decision and you feel like, okay, now I have to stick to it, although I really hate this, you're going to hate your business in a year, and then maybe you risk ruining it for you. And then that thing that you thought you loved, you're going to resent and you're going to stop. And that's not helping anyone. So the flexibility. So it's for me, it's the game between the self-compassion and the devotion. So knowing when to push through and knowing when to take a step back, and knowing how to rest and knowing how to, okay, this is hard, but I'm going to keep going. So sorry, there is a fly here because it's super.
I just saw it.
it's all over the place, and Mama's trying to eat it, and she's like, I think she want to be part of it. So sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. No, look, you have been incredible. You have given so much amazing advice. I appreciate you coming on here, and I know our audience is going to love this because you've just been so transparent and vulnerable. And look, I really appreciate you coming on. So thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work you do and for giving space for people to share that, because that's so needed. That's, as I said, the path is so lonely. And maybe if I had heard someone talking about it, or if someone had asked the right questions, everything. So the work you do now is exactly that. So it's really appreciated. And I feel honored that I get a chance to be here. So
thank you. It was amazing. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.